Hey guys, how's it going? And today I have a special guest with me, Mark Waid.
Good evening, sir.
Yep, thank you so much for coming on. I've been a huge fan of your work. You have done so much for the comic industry. I mean, Wally West alone, it would be one of those characters you've got to
Mhm.
staple on. So much. Your current work on World's Finest, for example, has been phenomenal. You have Batman versus Robin coming up soon. You've just done so much, but
Thank you.
let me just get a word in edgewise first. But let's just start simply. What got you into comics? What was and got you into reading them?
I was an only child for the first 7 years, and I was always precocious. Parents and grandparents around who were eager to teach me how to read, so I had sort of a handle on reading. At like 3 or 4 or whatever, I could do simple reading, and that's night home a Batman comic after the TV show came out, and that was it. That's what got me hooked. Reading or buying comics ever since.
Yep. And now you started off as an editor in comics first. Well, what made you decide to go from editing to I'm going to write these things?
Desperation. I mean, really, I left. I mean, I never really wanted to be a writer. I had no ambition for artist growing up because I just didn't think I could be that creative on a regular basis, and I wanted to be involved in the creation of comics, but not having to write them. So I was at
Right.
DC for a couple of years and left DC. Well, and luckily I had made enough contacts and friends from with Brian Augustine and Dan Rath Comics at the time, who trusted me to do some writing, and not too long after, is this audio breaking up or is it just me? Is my audio
Yeah, yeah.
breaking?
I think it's a bit of a delay, so I think it's trying to catch up with it all. I had a different someone else beforehand. It was something similar, but nowhere near as bad as then. That one was really bad, but here you seem to be
Okay,
pretty good. There's a slight popping a little bit, but for the most part, it's good. If it gets bad, I'll let you know.
okay, great. There you go. All right, so
Yep.
where was I? So left staff. Brian gave me Flash. Took off from there, and I've been very lucky ever since.
Right. In fact, funny when I met you being an editor and you brought up Brian Augustine, you guys had worked on, you had edited his Gotham by Gaslight.
Yeah,
And who came up with the idea first? Was it his idea or, yeah, how did it get started?
it was as most things with Brian and me, it was a double play. It
Mm-hmm.
was, it's hard to remember because a lot of us
Ah,
was
jeez.
just,
And someone's already gone.
um, hey, yeah, um, yeah. Um, I'm sorry, I keep getting distracted by. I'm not going to look at the comments anymore.
No, no,
Never
it's
read the
all right. It's
comments.
all right. It's all right.
I was editing.
Don't worry. We already got it taken care of.
I was reading Origins, which is an anthology book, and
Mm-hmm.
I had an oversized annual to do because we'd already done Superman, we'd already done Wonder Woman, we'd already done the big characters, and thought, if we did like alternate universe versions of their, like, what if Superman landed in Russia? I said in 1988, not knowing why I should have run with that idea then. Um, you know, what if Wonder Woman this? And I think it was Brian who called me up and said, in Victorian Gotham fighting
Mm-hmm.
Jack the Ripper, and he called me, talking, all the time, like off hours and stuff, and it just went it the story practically wrote itself, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then once we got it wasn't hard to get anybody to approve this book.
Right. But yeah, and I just love how much that this set the standard for all the elsewheres that were to come. I mean, you brought up with Superman, what if he landed in Russia and all that? It's like, I mean, Mark Millar would take that ball, of course, and so many, but I mean, it wasn't called Elseworlds at first, but did you ever expect for it to explode the way it did with all these alternate continuities?
When in fact, I have a very distinct memory about 1990. 6 or 7, maybe a little earlier,
Hmm.
walking into Brian had a kid at that time, young kid at that time, and we just kind of cruised the action figure aisle, and we saw a million Batmans from
Hmm.
caveman Batman to pirate Batman to whatever. And I remember we looked at each other like, oh my god, what have we done?
Hmm.
So and so in DC just finally hit a wall with that stuff, which
Right.
the somebody wanted to do Flash during the Peloponnesian War or whatever, scrape and bottom there.
Right.
DC sort of junked the whole program, but still dabble in that world today.
Right. But of course eventually you went on doing Flash, and I still have my copy of, this is my
Cool.
favorite, one of my favorite Flash stories, The Return of Barry Allen, where, as you said in the intro, um, about bringing, like, people want Barry back, all right, but we want to focus on Wally, things like that. And then this just came up with the idea of, what if he came back, but what if he didn't?
You can't give the audience what they want, quote unquote, because the audience wanted, if it knew what it wanted, it wouldn't be an audience. Henry Ford has a famous, which he said if you asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. No, it doesn't know what it wants until it sees
Right.
it, but you have to give the audience what it thinks it wants. So Barry Allen
Hmm.
back, they really don't, and I'll show you
Right.
why they don't. Yeah.
Hmm. Yep, and you kind of redefined Reverse Flash even more so for other people to utilize. And of course, it took until many years later. I mean, Barry came back, and let me ask, where do you stand in them bringing Barry back eventually? Do you feel like that was the right call to make, or do you kind of wish they didn't do that?
I can see why it doesn't bother me as long as Wally is not eclipsed, and as long as Wally is still. I think Barry definitely served a purpose as
Hmm.
DC's first official saint. Barry definitely served a purpose as in his death. What it brought first was probably more important than the last 5 years of his own book. Um, but since then, the gates of heaven so many times that there was just no excuse to keep him off the board.
Right, definitely. And now, of course, I mean, you have stuff like Jeremy Adams. He's doing incredible work with Wally currently. And both you and then eventually Jeff Johns really expanded Wally, making him such a, like, he's one of the first characters who ever stepped up, took the mantle of his predecessor that he was a
Yep.
sidekick for, and everyone's embraced it to the point where you still have people saying, "Forget Barry, keep Wally," things like that. I mean, you must be so proud that you're one of the first to do that, because not many get that opportunity.
No, I'm very lucky there. And again, but I get it. I mean, Wally, I don't know if the statistic is still true after New 52, but I do know certainly before Barry was brought back, Wally had been in more stories than Barry. He'd been in more comics than Barry.
Hmm.
He made a show. He was, he had a lot more exposure than Barry, so that was people's Flash.
Exactly. And then you have the point where even when they're doing Barry, they give him Wally's personality.
Oh, absolutely, exactly.
Yeah, that's just crazy. But also you would eventually, got so much here, would
Sure.
do you would do fill-in issues during Morrison's one of JLA before you did your own run as
Mm-hmm.
well. One of the first things I still always loved that you did was you fixed Adam Strange after his miniseries kind of really darkened him for the sake of darkening him. I mean, what gave you the idea to do that idea? Was it just to fix him and all that? And yeah, the idea you did without reversing everything that was done.
I mean, it's it was done, and it was
Mhm.
actually as it stands, it's a good story. I
Right, right.
just love that character,
Hmm.
and I think my sort of stock in trade, I think I've carved out for myself as a creator is taking these characters that I love, why I love them, in
Hmm.
hopes that you will love them too. So, it wasn't ever, the miniseries had done.
Hmm.
You try to do as little harm as you can if you're gonna, if you're gonna muck around, try to keep as much of it as you can.
Right.
but I really just wanted to as a player because he's such a great character.
Definitely. And then, of course, in the chat, they brought about Tower of Babel. That is still one of the definitive stories. To the point where even in the current Batman arc, in
Yeah,
with Failsafe, they brought up Tower of Babel, saying like, "What is your countermeasure? The Justice League." But you just proved you could defeat the Justice League. So I do like how he kind of called out on that. But Tower of Babel, just you're technically before Morrison did it. You kind of gave us the idea of Batman having the contingencies for everything. What gave you that idea for that story?
it was originally the Professor X protocols. It was originally
Oh.
back for about the 10 minutes I was doing X-Men. It was an idea that had come at that point but having left X-Men, that idea needed a home.
Hmm.
So I had then the opening image of Bruce walking up to his parents' grave, and they're not there anymore. The parents have been dug up. That
Hmm.
was an image that stuck with me for I probably where I wrote the story. And so every month I'd paw through the new Batman comics, praying.
Hmm. Right. And funny you mention your X-Men run, because during that stint you had worked on stuff like Age of Apocalypse, and even the stuff was Onslaught. How was that time working on X-Men for the, as you put it, the 10 minutes you worked on it?
It was challenging. Was it was not a great fit.
Hmm.
Um, I think I did as best I could, and I'm still proud of the Jean Grey story in
Oh yeah.
issue 53. But it never really just the gestalt of what the books were about at that time and what they wanted the books to be about. I was sort of steering them a little into the superhero, and I was also really interested in trying to resolve these dangling plot lines that
Yes.
were plagued,
Yes.
and put some new ones in. The only complaint about the book at the time was that, holy smokes, there's a ton plot lines here. There's so many that it's kind of hard to
Mhm.
get through a story.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, technically, you resolved the whole what Bishop had seen beforehand. That was a big one.
That was a fight. I remember that was a fight to say I really want to establish that because again they love it, but I'm glad we were able to tie up one or two of them in that run. Yeah.
Right. And I just gotta ask, whose idea was it to bring back how Professor X used to have a thing for Jean in the early days before and all that? Whose idea was for that?
If I were, it was my idea, and it doesn't age well. All I
Right.
can say is that I was just taking from what had been established.
Right.
That's all. So
Right.
it was
Right. I mean,
never it was never that he had a thing for
right.
Jean or an unrequited love, momentary.
Mhm.
In my mind, it was just a momentary little thoughts, professor
Right. Right. No,
mind.
no, I
Uh,
understand. I understand. I just
you know,
thought I asked because I didn't know whose idea it
his
was.
right. His next thought was almost certainly, well, that's inappropriate. So
Right. Exactly.
yeah,
But of course, that was something that Onslaught could have abused and used that to rip into
yeah,
Jean so she would hate Professor X.
that's exactly it. I mean, again, it was never, ever say anything other than you know people have unbidden thoughts that flit across, whether they're appropriate or not appropriate. It's just he didn't say it out loud. That becomes really creepily inappropriate.
Right. Now, of course, you also have your Captain America run, the one
Yeah,
that you did right before yours reborn, and then they brought you immediately right back right after that. And I gotta say, this is one of my favorite Captain America runs. Period. You brought him back to being more of a superhero. I mean, geez, just Gruenwald had done a good job, but I think
yeah,
towards the end you could kind of tell, and I don't mean to speak ill of the man. I'm just saying towards the end you could kind of tell he was puttering out. He'd been on there for years, so but you kind of brought a new, fresh life again. I mean, opening up with him teaming up with the Red Skull right out, out of the bag, and then Cosmic Cube, Hate Monger,
mhm.
all that stuff. I mean, bringing back Sharon. I mean, I gotta say that was one thing I always loved. This you basically say her going out saying you saw a videotape of me dying and you believed it. What?
That never sat right with me. That never sat right with me when I died, and Captain America's looking at
Yeah,
a videotape and going, "Well, I guess that's it."
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
kind words about Captain America, but man, that is all Ron Garney. That
yeah.
is pure. Had been written exactly as I wrote it, and drawn by just some, they pulled in off the street. Nobody would have cared. It
Exactly.
looked phenomenal.
Yep. And I gotta say, one thing I love about this hardcover is it includes the Red Skull issue that you originally wrote.
Yes, as written exactly. It was, it's a pretty famous, written with Marvel's full permission.
Mm-hmm.
A one-off with the Red's point of view, and to tell it from his point of view, you've got to get really dark and really ugly.
Exactly.
And we went through, and what frustrated me was just that we went through every single step, every single stage of the process. We got to sign off every single stage, and then as it was getting ready to go to press,
They chickened out.
someone chickened out. I got the call on Monday morning that hey, this was rewritten over the weekend. Sorry, a name pulled off of it because it's not mine. That my name's still on the cover because covers were printed in advance of it. But,
Right.
But again, Marvel's done me a real solid by making sure that the story on the book somewhere, and they've reprinted it a couple of times in its original form.
Right. Oh, someone wanted to ask, and I don't think they mean fighting. I just think means in general, Captain America or Superman.
Come on,
Yep.
I mean, I love Captain, but come on, this is
Yep.
The closest
Of course.
you'd come, the closest you'd come would be Superman. That becomes a battle, but other than that, it's Superman all the way.
Definitely. Which, funny enough, Birthright.
It's my favorite.
Yep. And for one, first of all, when I saw you met you then.
Get it? Yeah.
Yep. And I love this. Now, one thing I asked, the giant spider, was that done at all as a jab at what they were going to do in the movies?
It was, but it wasn't me. That was Lanil. Just I remember getting the pages back and going pale, going, "Oh man, and people are going to blame me for this."
Okay.
I felt the same with they were in Kingdom Come. Alex in the farm scene with Superman early on. Alex was putting like a super monkey in the background. And dog
Yep.
And I'm like, I didn't ask for that, and people are going to be mad at me. People are going to blame me for this. Yeah, the giant spider, not me. But
Okay.
all that said, Lanil did a great job. We had a choice of a couple or three different artists for that book, and I only because I've loved his work, but because the idea was I wanted to give you somebody draw Superman before.
Right, definitely.
It was really an important part of like putting, okay, this is Superman going forward.
Yep, and if there was only one nitpick I have, and it's just a minor one, it's that the S is so big that once it got ripped off, it's like so much of its chest is showing. It's like, I mean, I'm not against it, but at the same time, it just feels like there's a certain size I feel that's appropriate for Superman. Sometimes it's too small. That was on the too big, but not in an annoying way. But yeah,
I'll take that.
Yeah, but yeah, that origin. I mean, one thing I always did appreciate was when you said in an interview that, oh, you were never a big fan of Businessman Lex, but you saw so many people around you had done it, and then you realized there must be something good to it. And I like how you utilize Lex in here, how he basically used the technology, pulled himself up, and yet at the same time, no, he's still evil. He's still evil Lex.
And he's still a scientist. But he's just, he's a businessman too. But my take on Lex has been that that's like 10 minutes of his day. Let me also say this about Luthor, and I keep wanting to say this whenever and every opportunity I have. Credit for that, and it's not John. was Marv Wolfman who came
Yep.
up with that,
Yep.
and it frustrates me, not to knock John, but just so many people are quick to credit Byrne because he showed up in the Byrne book first, but
Oh,
that's
yeah.
not where it was. It was
I
a
agree.
Marv. Yeah, Marv gets the
Yep, I
credit on
agree.
that one.
Yeah, Marv deserves it all because he came out with it long ago, even before Burns'
Yeah,
era. But they already approved of his Brainiac. They weren't going to give him both. That wouldn't have been fair. So that's where we got the power suit, Lex. And then, but then, so he gave it to Vandal Savage. But
right.
once he came over for Superman, it's like dusted off and like, let's do this for
Hmm?
Lex. Yep, but funny enough, when I saw you before, Man of Steel had been out for a while,
Hmm.
and since then, I have even more. So I used to be one of those guilty pleasure defenders, but now as it's gone on, I'm just like, I can't defend this movie anymore. I cannot,
Yeah,
especially John Kent, Jonathan. I cannot defend any of that. It's
no,
maybe it's like
no.
one line could have saved it, but I'm not sure. If he showed doubt in what he had said, that could have saved it. But him just saying maybe as an absolute, that's not John. None of it was John.
I've a sense that I still think it's a wrong-headed take, but look, so many people like that take on Superman. You know, they're
Mhm.
love being on social media to scream at people how much they love it.
Yep.
To their choice. You know what? If that makes you happy, there's been a different. I will never give you kills because he's killed before in comics.
Right.
He's spanked Lois Lane in Lane now. He's punched,
Yep.
he's punched Japanese people in the
Yeah.
face because he doesn't do that.
Right.
He dressed up as a Japanese prisoner and went yellow face to dig around.
Yeah.
And he doesn't do
You can't.
that either.
Yeah. You can't ignore that it happened. It might have been a different time and place, but at the same time, you cannot
Right.
deny it happened.
Well, yeah, he doesn't kill people. That's yeah. I
Yeah.
will. Yeah. And I think even less, Superman doesn't kill people, as it was. At that point, I went to the movie with several people, and one of them brought like their 10-year-old kid. His first big exposure to Superman,
Mm-hmm.
and I really was uncomfortable with the idea that this now was a 10-year-old kid's vision of Superman,
Yeah.
and that bothered me a lot.
Yeah.
That's just killing is wrong. I mean, it's something
Exactly.
we learned when we're 4 years old. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm off on a tangent, but you led me there. So
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I
let's
know.
move on.
I knew what I was getting into when I brought that up because
Yeah.
I agree completely. I mean, now you have something like parademons, for example. That's something altogether. Those are like monsters, no different than robots, correct? Or where do you stand on that when it comes to the parademons, for example?
I I will not be deliberately responsible for any intelligent.
Well,
That's my
intelligent.
that's my take. That said, it's an easy mistake to make. I mean, I remember Bold with George Perez doing the art. At one point, I had a Superman in fighting a dragon and killing the slaying the dragon, and it was George who called me. I don't know. Superman doesn't
Right.
kill. It's like, you know what? I completely, because it's a dream occurred to me, but you're right.
Exactly.
It's an easy mistake to make.
Right. I mean, I remember when Dan Jurgens did Superman Alien. He killed off one of them, but then afterwards, even with the xenomorphs, he's like, it's still wrong.
Yeah.
Yep. But of course, we got to talk about Kingdom
Sure.
Come.
Okay.
Just, I adore so much about this book and how it, much like Dark Knight Returns, it established so much of a direction for people going with the characters. Did you ever intend that, or was that something you kind of feel
No,
like, no?
no, no. Not a roadmap. It's a cautionary
Oh,
tale.
exactly. Exactly. I agree.
And every once in a while, somebody will do something with the Kingdom characters and look at me with those puppy dog eyes, raise, and I'm like, no, you're missing the point. We're not supposed to be in that future.
Exactly. Like Diane, Wonder Woman being more willing to kill. So many people point to this as the go-to thing, even though it completely misses the point that Diana was desperate to get the attention of her people again. That she embraced the Amazonian bloodlust, when it's not supposed to be
Right.
the right thing. So, yeah, but at the same time, I always love the stuff with Spectre and everything. And now the other thing is Superman and Wonder Woman. This also kind of set up. It really is also a go-to people go to for that relationship. Now,
Don't do that.
where? Yeah. I was about to say it's perfectly fine for one universe because there's no Lois. You need someone to keep Superman grounded,
Right.
but then eventually you
But
also did. Oh, sorry.
yeah, it just seems like low hanging fruit to me. It seems like putting Superman and Lois and one obvious move that
Yeah.
immediately turns me off because I don't easy. I'd rather you do something as a writer that's more difficult.
Right. Of course, that eventually led into the Kingdom, which gave us the idea of hyper time. Now,
Yeah,
who came up with that? Was that you? That was you?
it was a jam session between me and Grant. We were just talking about continuity in general and this and that. Some arcane stuff on a napkin that was the map of hyper time, and it was the one who came up with the name hyper time. But the rest
Right.
of it was just the two of us bouncing ideas back of Grant Morrison.
Yeah, that explains why you were the two guys who really handled it the most. More besides Titans, no one else really touched it. But I gotta say,
They weren't allowed to.
Oh,
They were mandate was you did what? We
right.
don't want parallel worlds. We don't want alternate
Right.
universes. This is the editorial mandate was no one gets to use hybrid. We created it, no one gets to use it. And so 20 years on, you know what? Here we are.
Well,
people
it's
are
coming
using
back
it.
now. It's bringing use again in
Right.
Flashpoint Beyond. That must make you glad that Jeff is trying to make it basically it's the opposite. You have one side that's the multiverse, and then you have hyper time and space. He's actually finding a way to make it
Yeah.
fit. But yeah, but with this though, I mean, so because I know that you had said before you weren't always well, I know. Sorry, Alex and you both have done your own follow-ups to it. This was yours, and he had done Thy Kingdom Come. First of all, did you ever read that story?
I did. His actual original follow up was with Gene Ha. He was going to do. He wanted. DC obviously wanted a sequel to Kingdom Come, and Alex came to the table with ideas about the new gods and the cosmic level of the DC universe, and wanting Gene Ha story ideas and designs. And it's no slight on the ideas, but I couldn't find a handle on it myself.
I completely understand.
I mean, it wasn't a rift or anything like that. It was more like look, my character moments and the big cosmic giant love that is not my wheelhouse. So Kingdom, for whatever reason, his stuff never really came to fore, but he did get him in the Justice Society book, and good for him, good on him. It was fun to see regular comics for a while.
Right, and another thing that one could say, that many people can make this claim: you recreated one team twice with the Legion. Post Zero Hour and the Reboot Legion. How did that feel to be the kind of guy who said, I rebooted it twice?
It's weird to get so many bites of the apple on that book. The first time we rebooted, right after 0 Hour, I just did an interview about this not too long ago. No one wanted to reboot the Legion. We loved the Legion. It was me, the writer, and Casey Carlson, who was the editor, and we loved the Legion. I would bow to
I love it too.
I would have bowed to no one in my love for the Legion. And so why would I want to reboot it? But man, Crisis and everything had just left us in a completely untenable position where every time with those characters, we kept having, pile on here. And at some point, we just finally had to admit we're trying to come up with all kind of convoluted continuity things that will allow us to be reflective of current DC continuity. But the current DC continuity is I'm building a house on sinking sand.
Right.
And
exactly.
so we pulled the Band-Aid, and that was the first time. And the second time with Barry, once more I was approached, hey, do you want to do the Legion? Yeah, I want to do the Legion. And this, like I said, it's never a case of I hate what the last, because I don't like that. I don't like it when it's done to my
Right.
But Legion is a special case because of the reboot and because of all the other continuity things that happened in DC. Since by the time you got to 2004, you couldn't give the comics away to people. But they were the second best-selling DC title in the 80s, and by the time you get to 2004, no one cared, and that was because gigantic mess, and there was no real good place to say, hey, so with that in mind, we knew we had to take a big swing. Like, we knew we shot across the bow and say, look, this is not just the same old thing that we need to do something brand new with it, top to bottom. And we did. And it did well at first. The second issue outsold the third issue outsold the second, which never happens.
Right.
And then the Lightning Saga. The Lightning Saga was happening at the same time.
Oh yeah.
And that's that will suddenly we're back in the same boat. Readers don't know. Wait, is this which one's the right stand? So we still maintained a good selling book, but we lost.
Yeah, that I understand. Where did you stand on when Jeff revealed that the 3-boot Legion was from Earth Prime? Where did you stand on that? Do you think that was a good idea?
I'm okay with it. I mean, I remember we had the conversation about it, and I thought that was a clever idea. That because in our Legion series, they were shown reading 20th century comics.
Exactly. I think that's what he was going with.
Fine.
Right. Now, recently, I had one of the other people in the chat, her name's Bianca. We had gone over Jim Starlin's Infinity Abyss, which in part was one of the 3 books that had kind of influence was your Khazar run.
Yeah.
And now, from what I understand, Thanos was not meant to be Thanos originally. It was supposed to be...
No. This, again, it's, this is not a case of me complaining. This is a case of me saying,
right.
And that's kind of the fun of doing what we do, is that every once in a while, like that thrown at me, because it forces me to find some creative way around it. And in this case, it was going to be Kang, and then we found out that another editorial office was using Kang.
Avengers, probably.
And then it was going to be Korvac, but then somebody else was using Korvac. And by now we're like 3 or 4 issues in, and we've all scared. So it has to be somebody. And really, we went down the list of characters that would fit the clues that we'd already laid, the breadcrumbs we'd already laid. And because Thanos, at that exact moment in time, Thanos had been severely powered down. The last appearance before that, he'd been severely powered down. So he seemed to put him in. I thought it was a really good story. I think it looked great because Andy Kubert's amazing. And it is what it is. Jim Starlin hated it, but, we seem to have made our peace over the years.
Oh, yeah, and besides, I thought the idea of... Because it wasn't just your story. If it was just yours, but it was fact yours was just one of 3. I can understand why Jim would get annoyed, because like 3 stories close together. Yeah.
Well, it's easy. It's not even that. It's that it's easy to, if you make it super reductive and beats Thanos, that sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
It sounds absurd when you say it. Reductive, and you're not actually reading the story. So once you story and see the circumstances, not the least of which is Thanos has been severely powered down
Right.
administration.
Yeah.
I think it makes more sense. It just, but it's if you just say, oh, Kazar beats Thanos. Well, of course,
Yeah.
when they're both on this, that anybody can beat Thanos.
hmm But now, of course, there's your Fantastic Four one with the late great Mike Wieringo, and this I love this, but I also love how you guys were going to end it at one point, but then they were going to replace it with some stupid idea, and then right beforehand it was like, okay, never mind, undo it, forget it, bring you guys back, and I just gotta say, you guys really recaptured what it was for the four. It just not many people really got that about the four.
I so love those characters, and again, it was, my goal was, you know, people love Ben, people
hmm
love Sue, people love John. But at that point, nobody under the age of 50 cared the least about Reed Richards, and that's okay, great. If Reed is the one that needs the most love and the most work, let's focus it on Reed, and that's why he's which the rest of the book is seen. Uh,
Right.
I mean, everybody else gets their play, everybody gets their moments, but Reed becomes a more central character, and I think that worked out well.
Yep. And then, of course, you have the hereafter issues where basically the one above all is Jack Kirby. That is
Yeah,
still one of my favorite Marvel panels of all time, was finding out that Jack was God. And you're like, hold on, picks up the phone. God has a phone. Who does he answer?
of course. I mean, it's only makes sense. Who would be the god in the Marvel universe? Jack Kirby.
Exactly.
That is
Exactly.
an example for anybody who is an aspiring writer out there. Let me give you a tip. Illustrate. This story is a good illustration of this.
hmm
I was able to convince Reboard to let me take the FF to heaven,
hmm
but which was it has to be an unduplicatable phenomenon. In other
Exactly.
words, you have to find a way to do it that can never ever be recreated. It's a challenge more often than you think when
hmm
you're writing super menaces or threats or opportunities or whatever that can't be replicated because it'd be overused all the time.
Exactly.
And in this case, I realized the groundwork had already been laid 30 years earlier with when was early on was using his big experiments, the one that scarred his face and so forth, to try for life.
Right.
So if we already have the mechanism in place, and
Exactly.
that's what sold Tom.
hmm Yeah, because it tied back into Fantastic Four lore. You didn't just pull it all out of your ass, and
Right.
yeah, yep. So, what the else I ask now? With your current stuff with World's Finest, I mean, first of all, it started getting set in what it was set in the past, the initial part of the story. I've had to reread it recently, but now you're currently now doing Batman versus Robin, so you're doing more stuff in the present day. Now I'm aware of your stance on with Superman married to Lois, but where is your stance on John Kent?
And I understand why people love married Lois and
Right.
Superman that away because it's
hmm
been the status quo for 30 years now. So that's the
Exactly.
Superman that people know. In modern DC continuity, in mainstream continuity, you've got to undo that marriage. That time has passed. And so
Right.
when I read my Superman comics, I enjoy what I enjoy about those. There's a difference between me seeking something
hmm
and me saying I can't make it. In other words, there's things I like about married Lois and
hmm
Clark. There's a lot I like about John Kent and him having a son.
hmm
But when I write, it doesn't really. I can't make that fit into my vision, and
Right.
that is not in any way a knock on the work that people are doing or the characters. It's simply a matter of I appreciate it. I think it's great, but I can't do the kind of Superman stories that I think that I can do best.
Right.
So I'm fine.
And I completely
Yeah,
understand. I
yeah,
completely understand. I mean,
yeah.
because basically, it's one of those cases of write what you prefer to write. It doesn't mean that you're just going to. Yeah, actually, no. Sorry, I have a different question. A good question has popped up. If you
Yeah.
had an opportunity to change a storyline you created, what would it be and why?
Uh, the easy. We killed Ice back in the
Hmm.
JLI days, back Judgment Day. Bad call.
Hmm.
Bad call.
Oh yeah, it took
I that
how long for Gail to bring her
yeah,
back?
yeah, yeah. I regret that enormously. It was wrong-headed and stupid. I mean, I wasn't alone in that room making
Right.
that decision, but you know, so
Hmm.
that's a good question, though.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'm sure there are more. If you look back, I'm sure there are more.
Hmm. Exactly.
But
And
that's the one
now,
that comes.
right now, as Batman versus Robin, it's clear this is utilizing not only the stuff that you've come up with, but stuff that Joshua Williamson's been working on and all
Mhm.
that. How did all this come together for this event? I'll just call it.
Sure. I pitched it a year and a half ago as simply Batman versus Robin with um, and it just grew from there because it fit nicely into what DC was planning to. And once we started working on World's Finest, which is set in the near past, ways
Hmm.
to actually make that tie into what we want to do here. And so it just grew and grew,
Hmm.
and now it's a big event, and it looks phenomenal. Mom and I, Jordy Belair is doing colors. It looks just amazing, and week, and it looks great. And
Oh, it does.
I'm
I cannot wait for it next week.
really happy with it. You're going to see Batman in a world you've never really seen him in before. You're going to see him with the biggest problem with dealing with Damian. If you're fighting Damian, and there's a reason he's fighting you with, you know, that doesn't inviolate that's been done with Damian recently. Um,
Mhm.
he's clearly being possessed by something. So,
Right. Obviously.
so, but Batman's big challenge with fighting Damian was every device, every grappling hold, every bat cave, every tool, everything in Batman's arsenal knows. And so
Mhm.
Batman has to find brand new ways of doing the stuff. Otherwise, Damien's going to cut him off at the knees. He has no
Exactly.
resources. He can't, he can't cave. He can't use the bat plane. He can't use the bat family. He can't do any of that stuff because Damien's one.
Right. Definitely. And like I said, I cannot wait for that. And now here's the big one. Now you don't have to spoil anything, but from what I've seen in the preview pages, Alfred is a what?
What? Yeah,
Yeah. I'm just wow. And the fact that because I've been missing Alfred. Now I'm not asking you if he's here to stay. That's a secret. I'm positive. But I just gotta say, I want to thank you in general for bringing him back. It's just like I've missed him. I think everyone's missed him so much.
I think everybody missed him. I do. So all there, that's Alfred. Showing up in issue 1, and keep reading. That's all.
Right. Yep. Now I don't know if you've heard, but there's talks of possibly in Flash because you're the one who came up with. Now I know Jeff was the one who actually brought the twins in, but you're the one who kind of got that started with Kingdom Come and all that. And then you wrote the kids after they were brought after Wally was brought back during your second run.
Mhm.
What do you think of this possibility of them having another kid now? I mean, because that's what Jeremy. Yeah.
I'm fine with. I think it's cool. I think it was Jeremy's idea. It was a really few weeks now, and,
Hmm.
it's a really cool idea. And I know where he's
Agree.
going with it, which is so.
Ooh.
I really like what Jeremy's doing. There's
Oh, I'm loving
Jeremy,
it.
being, Josh Williamson. These guys are just in and out of
Hmm.
the park.
Definitely.
Every time I go to the store. So I'm really
Hmm.
lucky to be able to share, time with these people.
Yep. Oh, but here's a good question. What's it like working with Dan Mora? Because the guy is a workhorse. I mean, he have this. He has Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers. He has Once and Future. Just wow.
And he has another thing that you don't know about.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
all that said, it's amazing to me. He is every day like clockwork. Bing, here's the next bit, and it's always great. And the thing I love most about him and what is great working with that, it's so fresh and
Hmm.
so vital, and that it keeps the book from looking like a nostalgia act, right? Past. It
Yes.
looks as current as anything else DC is publishing. And more than once, what I like, one of the things I love about Dan is more than once, like a Phantom Zone projector or a
Hmm.
costume or this bit of history, and I'll send him reference, but I will always, this is corny looking from 1963. I'm just giving you a starting point. What's here? I mean, the 10-year-old in me would love to see exactly that because I'm a kind of, some of that stuff doesn't
Hmm.
age well. Do what you want to do with it. And 9 times it gives it back to me like I sent it to him, but somehow looking on, it doesn't look dated at all. And yet it's the same Phantom Zone projector or the same this. And I don't know how he does that, but he does it well.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I agree because seriously, he has become one of my new favorite artists. Just how, and again, the fact that this guy just chugs it along. There are some artists who you would definitely tell what they're putting their heart into. With him, with Dan, you can't tell which if he's putting
No,
more heart into one or another. You cannot tell. It's like, yeah, it's just that's what I just love best about his work. Speaking of other great artists, you had worked with George
mm-hmm.
Perez, may he rest in peace, on Brave and the Bold, and
Yeah,
this was a great story arc and everything. And then you also did the one shots, which one of my favorites has to be Superman and Catwoman. That yeah,
thank you.
yeah, that is just my favorite. Just this whole idea, especially the moment she sees that ad, she's like, hot, yes. Just
Yeah,
all of this. It's like, no one does those two paired up often. It's like always,
that's
yeah.
my favorite thing to do. This is why the Doom Patrol shows up in World's Finest, because
Hmm.
we've never seen the Doom Patrol before. You know, we've never seen Robin and Supergirl have a mission together, and so and you'll see more of that in upcoming issues, where you've got the, you know, basically because we've never seen that combo before. I love established DC characters who have never really interacted and
Yes.
showing what it would be like if they interacted.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, that whole one, especially how you also tied it into the second Clay face and all that, his origin and just so much about that. But my of all of it though, my favorite moment was when Selena comes up with a disguise for Superman, and it's Clark Kent, and yet she's
And it's
seemingly none the wiser.
she has no idea. She's basically just says, "Look, we got to go undercover here. Put these glasses on." He's
Sure, we don't need a wig. No, too much.
really does. Yeah, he really doesn't want to put those glasses on. But
Yeah, I love that. Just and then again, Selena's just all like, "Oh, who cares? Come on." It just yeah, and then of course I'm not going to grab them all because they're a bit too far away. But 52, that has been, in my opinion, one of the best collaborative comics I've ever read. Still, one of my top 10 favorites. Still, and what was your favorite? Either story moment you wrote or any ideas you have. What would you say is your favorite big standout in 52?
that's a good question because I recently reread and went over a lot of that stuff. It was a great everybody in that room just hummed, and we were all like like a band. I mean, we were arguments that were never cross words. That were never pounding on table. Everybody was just the editor Steve Wacker ran that room, and
Hmm.
Steve comes from improv. That's his background, and so Steve
Oh.
knows the rule of improv is don't say no, just say yes, and is lean into it and play off of what the other person's doing. And that's how the room was. The original rule was don't just say no, lean
Hmm.
into it. there's a lot of good stuff in that. That I think that Yun Sue at the end of
Mm,
that series is my favorite moment, because that's something we so wanted to do in that room. But we
mhm,
were just, we know we wanted to bring, and Grant, at one point, Grant and I both said at the exact same moment, detectives.
mm,
And that was going to be a spin-off book, but think that would work. So,
right.
still, but anyway, that was my favorite moment, I think, is of Ralph and Sue.
Definitely. I wish there was more done with it. It's like between that and then when the New 52 started, they only made like one or two appearances, period. And it always just felt like this isn't right. It's just,
It's,
you miss them.
yeah, I mean, the regime up there just, it's like there was no room for levity. There was no room for comics that weren't grimly serious for a long time. And luckily, that has changed. There's a new renaissance there, I feel like, because writers are allowed to go with their gut, wider range of tones in the story.
Hmm. Definitely. Also, just because I have it here, when you did the Flash issue of DC 1 million, that was also great. Just so much. Obviously, you can tell I love your Flash run. I wish I can get the trades, but thank God I got DC Universe Infinite to go over everything. But just your run and Jeff's run, and just
Yeah.
it feels like you and Jeff, you were two of those creators that are almost always one lead, because of your flash work, it just feels like one giant run. Yours and his run felt like one giant run almost, even though there's a difference. You handled things one way, he handled a different focus on another, like the Rogues. I mean, I showed the tray for Underworld Unleashed and all that. And I remember you telling me how you wish you could have done more with the Rogues, if I recall, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was just, but my favorite part of the Flash mythos. It was all, and I think that I wish I had done. Jeff did an amazing job. I mean, that was what Jeff keyed in on. That was the book, and my book was when his concentration on the rogues was on point.
Mm-hmm. But I don't ever remember mine is the book that's kind of falling apart and everything. But
Okay, it means that it's well read and well loved. That's all I care.
yep.
Okay.
Well, that's what when I bought it at the convention, I bought it like that just so you could have you sign it. It was just like, oh, it's falling apart, still falling apart. But again, in reading through it all, this was a clever idea of giving villains upgrades and everything. And yeah, I just love that whole idea of giving it. And I like those kind of events where you come up with a theme and then you have the tie-ins be whatever the other writer wants to do with it. And do you think those are the preferred type of events where everything's kept to the main thing, but the side effects are in the tie-ins?
Well, I mean, the best thing to do with an event. I mean, I think the ones that are simple ideas that allow other small amount of freedom to play into what they're doing. You want to just give them the least number of parameters set up and let them do their thing. The more you try to dictate what someone else is tying, you end up with something that nobody's happy with.
Right, definitely. Now, obviously with you back at DC and all that, I'm not going to ask why you haven't been in DC in a while. I'm not going to go into that type of dirty laundry stuff.
Right.
But during your time and when you were at Marvel, you did such great stuff with Daredevil. I like to always say you kind of re-enlightened Daredevil. They pushed him to the brink of his darkness. And why do you think so many people want to do that with characters like Matt, where they feel so much of him want to focus on his darkness that they forget he used to be a lighter character, you know?
Right. And even if he hadn't been a lighter character before, there's just ways you can go darker and darker and darker and darker. It becomes where you've just dug so deep a hole. Um, so with the mischaracterized a lot of my run gets mischaracterized a lot as the light goofy Daredevil,
Right,
which
right.
is nothing like that. There's nothing
Oh
goofy
no, no,
about
I no. That's why I said
nothing goofy
lighter. I didn't say light and goofy.
legs or whatever. Yeah, um, but it looks it just it vast, which I love. I much rather write a book that can be and amusing on one page, and you turn the page and suddenly, oh my god, you've gone. I love that kind of writing, and I love
Hmm.
that kind of when I read that kind of stuff. That's what I like. So I like bringing that to the book. That you get to draw some sort of line where Daredevil is not at the bottom of the single issue. People can do that. Writers can do that. Writers can do that really well.
Right,
It's just not something that's not my sandbox. That's not what I am good at doing. So rather than Frank Miller, the mandate from editorial was not just be the best Mark Waid.
right, definitely. And but I just gotta say that's one thing I just liked though, because it just felt like not just the prior run before him, but just for many runs beforehand, it just kept felt like, what are we going to do to put him down deeper? And it always feels that's the one thing though. When it comes to Matt, he's more than Spidey. Even Spidey, he just gets bad luck. He doesn't get
Right.
like the world is coming. His whole personal life is coming to an end. Matt does though. It feels like
Matt does though, yeah. Yeah, Matt has the worst. But that's all you can do if
yeah,
you keep being in miserable, you can either stay miserable or you can find a way out. So,
yep,
um,
yep.
yeah,
Now obviously, oh, sorry.
yeah. Now to turn that around, I said, being miserable, but that in no way reflects. It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed
Exactly.
this conversation. Thank you. Um,
Yep.
Give me a chance to talk things. So,
Yep. Well, one more question. One more thing I want to bring up.
yeah,
Irredeemable. Since you just they did the
yeah.
Kickstarter and all that, which I backed, and I for the 3 omnibuses, and you have the upcoming going back to that. How does it feel going back to Irredeemable after all these years?
It's weird, but I've been talking about things to do and things we can do and things that are surprising. And we found it'll be a little while before we get to it. I mean, we don't go to your store tomorrow and look for the next issue,
Right.
but we will time in 2023.
I cannot wait. But yeah, thank you so much, though, Mark, for coming on. It's been just incredible to talk comics with you. And thank everyone in the chat for everything. Thank you all for being nice and polite. I know a lot of you have a lot of questions, but couldn't get to all of them. But again, just thank you so much. And hey, hope to have you on another time in the future, maybe next year.
You bet. Much.
Take care.